Hello, welcome to the Free Will, Science, or Religion podcast. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega, wsdtime, and Juris. And so, what we were going to be talking about today is we were going to try to be scientific and overcome our emotional vulnerabilities, like taking things personally, resorting to ad hominems, etc. Like things that we do that are not productive conversation because we get emotional rather than rational, and I'm not very good at communicating this, but I think we all want to have productive discussions. Yeah, jump in, George.
Chandler, let me give a bit of a background. All right, so what brought us together is we all get that nobody has a free will, right? And to the extent that we get this, logically it should lead to our not blaming ourselves and punishing ourselves for what we get wrong. And we should also treat other people more respectfully and kindly because of that, because it's not really and so what happens, we get involved in these email exchanges. Fortunately, we don't do this online on this podcast. We tend to I guess in person we do act more according to this no free will perspective. But in some of our email exchanges, I know I've been involved in this. I get, we get sucked into kind of actually blaming each other. We forget about all this free will stuff, that we don't have it. And we're trying to make a point and other people aren't getting it. And so we lose this perspective, and that leads to a lot of ad hominems, arguments, incivility. And so this podcast is about, it's kind of to help us better, not just get that we don't have a free will, but, just help us integrate this so that when we talk to each other, when we relate to not just ourselves, but to other people, we can use this knowledge to be better people.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, because I think we forget sometimes, and we get in these weird arguments and get to reacting the way that we're used to, that we did for years, So, and it's so. For example, George, now how do you handle something differently, compared to when you used to be a free will believer and blame people? And let's say you came across a Trump supporter or somebody that really ticks you off because of some view they have. How is it that way as opposed to now the way that you aim to behave?
Yeah, well, I think, politics is a perfect example of this, because I used to be extremely political. And if somebody was a Republican, I would hate them, because of their views, because of, ignoring climate change and just oppressing minorities and just so much. And so now with this Trump thing, over the last 8 years or so, 7 years, I kind of I said to myself, well, I'm not going to allow politics to get between me and other people. That was the basic premise. But then I said to myself, and the rationale for this is that, they very literally don't have the choice of whether to be for Trump or something. They are who they are because of who they are, because of who their parents were, and whatever circumstances made them who they are. And so that really has helped me to a great extent in kind of not judging them. Now, all right, so that's politics. It's a bit different, so it works in politics. In my personal relations with people, it's a bit harder. But it definitely has worked in politics.
Yeah, and see, my approach is basically to never talk about those subjects, because I'll tell you, I have just a few friends that I sometimes do stuff with, and we never discuss religion or politics or philosophy really, which is sad, and yet that's the way to make sure there's no fights, because I wanna still be their friend and have fun with them, So it's knowing what that balance is. I tend to keep those controversial things only for the podcasts.
Absolutely. WSD, Yuri, how's this related to
Yeah.
your life? I mean, have you ever been able to use this?
Well, me, kind of like Chandler on that front, because I'll just not talk about it. Because every time I talk about it, I tend to get angry.
Well, yeah, because it's not just about the free will thing. Sometimes, when I talk about politics,
For me,
there's a lot of stuff that's wrong. Go ahead, Yuri.
Yuri, you there? What were you going to say?
Yeah, for me, I don't think it's made that large difference. It hasn't made that large a difference for me in that I was sort of going off in the wrong direction, some postmodernist relativism, can't even say the word, but which sort of leads to the same thing, but not that I'm advocating for that. I always treat the person in front of me. I might dislike particular groups, if you like, but I always sort of treat the person in front of me as an individual. And I don't think my loss of free will has made a big difference to me from that point of view.
Well, that's good. So, in other words, you had that kind of mindset before this whole free will. Basically, it's about treating people with respect. And so, I think what you're saying, is that one doesn't have to, understand that free will is an illusion to have a good reason to treat people with respect.
Yeah, but then again, I grew up in England, so therefore I have this inherent dislike of the French. Joke.
Yeah.
It's although my ethnic origin's got nothing to do with England or anything, but it's just being aware of the programming that's gone on.
Sorry, do the French think they're better than you guys? What's the history of this stuff?
Oh, the English? Oh, 1066. That's the last time the French really conquered UK. And even then it wasn't the French, it was the Normans.
No, right, but that's the political history.
Or did I miss the
modern history? Because I know a little about Joan of Arc and all that stuff, but like modern history, how do the French view the English, and how do the English view the French?
Oh, the next, it's 21 miles between Dover and Calais. There's no point disliking people the other side of the world. You got to dislike your neighbors.
All right, so but you started out with saying you have problems sometimes with French.
Hello? Yo, you're breaking up.
What is it?
Yeah, I don't hear you anymore. Yeah, George.
We lost George.
Oh.
Yeah,
he was breaking up.
Yeah, his audio was breaking up a little bit. And it sounded like he was saying how Yuri had talked about not liking the French, and I was curious to know what that was about.
Happens, yeah. If maybe if one of you guys can text him saying,
there's this rivalry between the English and the French. So was it in 1950s Britain wanted to join the common market? French said no. 1972, 73, somewhere around there, Britain asked again. They said yes, and now Britain's leaving. You can just imagine what the conversations are like.
So you're saying it's partly political?
It goes back to this emotional aspect. It's the differences that we dwell on.
Okay, but when you remind yourself that the French don't have a free will, they are the way they are because they have to be. It's not up to them. Doesn't that make some difference?
Hey,
yeah. Well, yes, but it's still hard to see.
Go ahead, WSD.
It's still hard to see. And like I said, to see these people screwing up and mess up your life, that's kind of hard. I understand they have free will, but that's kind of hard to ignore and just brush off. Yeah.
And all right, so you're raising a very important point. In other words, like, fine, nobody has a free will, but we are designed to seek pleasure and avoid pain, and that means we respond to not just rewards, we also respond to punishments. So let's say, like in my life, I just I had somebody that I was started to become friends with, but then he would, I noticed a very devaluing side of him that like my friends tend to support each other and all. And this guy was just and he just so finally I wrote them this email with 9 points of all this stuff that he was doing. And, I might have been perhaps a bit too harsh. I'm not sure. But I was kind of doing that because fine, he doesn't have a free will, but he needs to know how he's treating people.
Yeah. And so how did he take it, George?
Well, I haven't heard from him for 4 or 5 days, and I'm thinking that I may want to reach out to him again, from the perspective that this is happening to him, he's not doing it, but then another part of me is saying, well, he really needs to kind of take stock of himself, of how he's, and so no, Chandler, that's a good question, because to the extent that I really, really integrated this understanding that nobody has a free will, then I probably would reach out to him more. I wouldn't be as distant as I have been, after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's still important to let people know when they're doing something wrong. But here's what's interesting, and I think this is important: is people, part of the reason they don't like to be told they're doing something wrong or they're doing something that's hurting somebody is because they want to because they believe in free will and they want to maintain their image as a good person. And so that's where it gets complicated, because it leads people to this denial. Whereas I have no problem admitting I've done lots of stupid stuff, because I don't blame myself. It's easier to just acknowledge it as if I'm like an objective third person outside of myself, almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Chandler, and that's the goal. I mean, I have difficulty with that sometimes, even though, I understand, fine, I don't have a free will. If somebody accuses me of something, whatever, I sometimes will take it personally and stuff. And then, so it's there's this, disconnect between our knowing, and at least for me, some of us, it's good that you're succeeding with this, but that's the challenge. The challenge is not just to know this, but to, know it so well that it really affects our behavior, our reactions to other people in our interactions.
Yeah.
Yuri, you still there?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still here.
Here's my take on it.
Well,
here's my take on it. So it's Mahatma Gandhi's sort of statement: "Be the change you want to see in the world." You're not going to tell, or you're not going to be very successful in telling people they should behave differently. You just demonstrate how you think you should be, or we should behave.
Yeah.
And I'll stop talking.
Practice what you preach, basically.
Yeah.
I like that, Yuri.
Essentially.
Yeah, after about 30 years of trying to change the world, very recently, I've given up because it hasn't worked. I'm one person, whatever. And so I'm saying, well, fine, I haven't been able to change the world. Let's see if I can change myself. And maybe if I can change myself, let's say become really happy or whatever, then maybe I have something to write, then I can help other people make that same change.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, I have not exactly concerns, but I think there's a cognitive dissonance when those of us who don't believe in free will talk about better behavior. Like, for example, are you suggesting my electrochemistry and biochemistry and brain chemistry should behave better in some way? So I think whenever we use words like good, evil, better,
No, I mean, it's like,
Sorry, George?
in other words, for example, like, let's say, some of us, let's say I become, disrespectful of someone, right? And so, like, I say to myself, yeah, I shouldn't be that way. I should be better. I should be more respectful. But the key part of this is that, like, fine, but I'm not going to blame myself, and we have to apply this to other people. Fine, other people, we should treat each other well. We should treat each other with kindness and compassion and respect and all this stuff. But to the extent we don't, that's the key. When we don't, then like, fine, we'll address it, but without the blame.
Yeah.
There's another word I'm really suspicious of, should or shall. There's, was it Nietzsche in his, I forget which play, I think it was Thus Spoke Zarathustra, can't, anyway, so one of Nietzsche's plays, there was a dragon, and on every scale of the dragon was written "thou shalt," and the whole idea was to kill that dragon. So when, I know my wife's really sensitive when I sort of say to her, you should do this, and so basically just be aware of the word should. It's a strange little word.
Well, we have that same here in the United States. A lot of people are against that. People like, Albert Ellis, they said he like back in the 50s said, don't should on yourself. Yeah, don't, I know. But I mean, it's kind of hard to avoid with morality.
I'm not saying, well, again, we'll go back to, I'm the amoral one of this group, apparently. So to me, it doesn't make sense that there's a moral and immoral sort of pattern of molecules and atoms.
Actually, Yuri, you're actually making an implicit moral statement. You're saying we shouldn't say should.
Good one, George. You're absolutely right. That seems to be.
I'm not actually saying that. I'm just saying be aware of what we're saying. I didn't say. I actually very carefully didn't say shouldn't. I'm just saying be aware. That's my advice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Yuri. Here's a question. Why should we be aware?
Cookie, anybody?
I'll eat my crisp in a minute. I'm not saying you should in the sense that you ought to, or all I'm saying is this is what I do, and it's up to you guys whether you do it or not. There's no should about it.
All right, Yuri, I think what you're saying is like, I'm not going to say that this is an absolute right and wrong thing. This is what I believe, should be done, whatever, and it may be right, it may be wrong. How's that sound?
Right or wrong? Again, you're talking to somebody who professes to be amoral.
Okay, so yeah, see, Yuri, I think I and all the other co-hosts who have joined you before are still a little bit confused about this amorality thing. So maybe you can enlighten us as to what benefit is there, to this not using words of good or bad or should or shouldn't. Like, what is it that you personally get out of that?
I'm not saying there's a benefit. All I'm just saying, to me, it just doesn't make sense in a world that is determined. It doesn't make sense to think in terms of benefit, good, evil, bad. I must admit we can't help ourselves, but to me, ultimately, it just does not make sense. Are you saying that if there is a benefit, if that's the way you want to think of it, Chandler, the benefit would be to view the universe that we tick in more accurately, if that's a benefit.
Yeah. See, what I have a hard time.
And I'll stop talking again.
Yeah. So here's the thing: is this is very confusing though, because like you're saying, okay, that it doesn't make sense to think in terms of good or bad, but the fact that there are some things that are more desirable or undesirable, if that's any clearer than good or bad, which means the same thing in my mind.
Chandler, are your desires good or bad?
What?
Yuri, say that again.
Are your desires good or bad?
Man, Yuri's audio is terrible.
Try
Are your
one more
desires good or
time.
bad?
Yeah.
Try one more time. Still didn't get it.
Yeah, unfortunately, Yuri has a bad connection, I think.
One more time.
Let me use that word.
Okay.
Try it again, Yuri.
Well, are your desires good or bad, Chandler?
Ah, there you go. We got it.
Yeah.
What?
Chandler, are your desires good or bad?
That's a good question because like sometimes I have this mentality that it's better to not have desires because we can't shape reality to suit our desires. So if I could be desireless, I would probably do that, but I can't.
That's very Buddhist.
Yeah, I sometimes I feel very Buddhist like that.
Be honest, my desires. You see my desires, y'all would get a heart attack. I'll be honest. Y'all would not like yo.
Yeah.
My desires are kind of.
All right, so Yuri, where are you going with this?
Well, I guess he's not talking.
Oh, I'm just trying to point out. So you're saying, well, it's better not to have desires. So in other words, you're saying you're desiring not to have desires.
Exactly.
The whole thing, we just got to be very careful because we've come to the conclusion that free will is an illusion.
Exactly.
And then we got to take a good close look at everything else that we hold dear.
Yeah, doesn't that blow your mind, desiring to not have desires?
Right, and Yuri,
Yeah.
you raise a very important point. In other words, like we were actually most technically, we're not desiring that we have no desires. We're desiring that whatever is making us have these unfulfilled desires stop doing that. Right? Because it's not about us. It's about however.
And going back to the Buddhist sort of frame of mind, is when we say I or we, when I talking about I, what it is, it's a reflection of the universe. It's basically all the sciencey bits that have gone on to create my 86 kilos of protein, fats, and water. So that's, it, and the I or the me, it's a little bit of an illusion. Just like free will.
Absolutely. I think we completely agree.
Yeah, we've talked about this before because I mean, if we think of having a self or a soul that is the author of our decisions, the fact that we don't have a free will means that even our concept of a self is completely an illusion. It's non-existent.
Yeah, it's like we're definitely part of the universe.
Just be careful with illusion. Illusion, there's still different meanings. It can be the same as a delusion, or so the way I use it is not as it seems.
Yeah, I think I mean.
So just because something's an illusion doesn't mean. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, I think relative to this, it's like what's illusory is we are part of the universe. Just like our hand is part of us, right? But like our hand isn't the decision-making part of us. So in other words, we're part of the universe. We're just not part of the decision-making part of the universe.
Yeah, well, it's interesting.
I'm not sure about that. But
Yeah, and I mean, a question that brings up is what part of the universe ever makes a decision? Because there's actually not like a part that decides things, but it's just, everything's causally determined based on what came before. So even that analogy, while I understand where you're going, George, may not be perfectly accurate.
Yeah, and you apply logic to it, Chandler. I mean, like then you have this infinite regress where you never reach a point where even the universe makes a decision because there's always something, a cause for that.
Exactly. Yeah, it gets really insane.
Ultimately, we end up with decisions not being what they seem.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
Think we make decisions. We think we make decisions, and in a sense, we do. But then again, those decisions
guys,
aren't
let's
exactly.
get back more to this theme. WSD, in your life, like how has this free will perspective affected the way you interact with people, what you think about people? Has it had benefit? Have you noticed the benefit of understanding that we don't have a free will?
Well, I'm not as snappy at people. I notice I'm not as angry as I used to be. But
cool.
I've been calming down, yeah. Because like I said, just like this is one incident at my job, right? Where this dude, right? I'm a school bus attendant. This is before I get my CDL, but this dude.
Wow, Chandler, are you catching that or?
Yeah, I'm hearing WSD talk about something at his job when he was a school bus attendant or whatever.
I am, but yeah.
Oh, all right, then that must be me because I wasn't catching on this line. All right, but you got it. Okay.
All right. It's just that when it's like when he does something wrong, like he knows he's not supposed to get off the bus, go to the store, and feed the kids. A bag of potato chips for the kids to share, how that's gonna go.
Okay.
But yeah, and like I said, he been queuing this for a couple of days, and one day I just let him have it. I cussed him out.
Right, but that's the thing. I mean, you're getting, and so I mean, the reason we've done all these 180, 6 podcasts and all is because, like, we want to be affected by this. Fine, we're not going to be perfect. We will kind of like lose it, every once in a while. But if in general we're becoming less angry and snapping less often, that's the point. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
My wife might disagree.
But like I said, man, then again, I understand what it is, but that was ridiculous. I'm sorry, he knew better.
Right, but WSD, when you think about it, sure, he knew better, right? But something was stopping him from doing better, even though he knew better.
No, spite to get on my nerves or piss
All right,
me off. I don't know.
Let's say that's the case, right? But then again, like he doesn't have a free will. I mean, like it's like the universe is like using him to get to you. I mean, the universe uses other people to get to us, and then that we should have a whole new episode on that. On why would the universe do that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. By the way, there were no kids on the bus while I cussed them out. By the way, so.
Well, I guess that's good.
Yeah, at least I try to keep a level of professionalism.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're not really cuss in front of the kids. But he did that on the bus. The kids was boiling hot.
Yeah.
Well, Chandler, talk more about how, like, you use, because...
Well, I just asked my wife how I've changed since I've...
Oh, yeah, Yuri, yeah. So what's your wife's perspective? Absolutely.
Yeah, she said whatever it is, it's very subtle. Whatever that means.
Well, ask your wife. Here's the thing. Let's say your wife's in a restaurant, right? And she knows somebody in the restaurant has Tourette's syndrome. And this person all of a sudden starts, like, doing what people with Tourette's syndrome do, start, like, saying stuff. Is she going to blame that person, or is she going to say, oh, I understand this, so it's not really his fault?
I don't think she's going to blame him.
My wife?
I don't think he's going to blame
we grew up... we grew up with a child with special needs, so it's not going to be an issue.
So I said, then that's a perfect example, like whether if we have special needs, then we get it. It's like we don't, a person doesn't decide whether to have special needs or not. So that kind of like is a way to understand that these things aren't up to us.
Yeah, another way of saying it is like, okay, it becomes when you're upset with someone for their behavior, like you realize it wasn't any more up to them than the color of skin or hair they're born with, because it's really not any more up to them, and yet people act as if people deserve to be punished based on some aspect of their behavior. And what
and go ahead.
Yeah, all I was going to say is that to the extent we ever do anything to correct someone's behavior, I think I just want it to be done out of reforming that person and helping everyone be happier in general and suffer less, rather than done because you feel like the person deserves it, because nobody deserves anything good or bad.
Absolutely. And you raise the, we don't get to decide, what color our hair is. And a major example is we don't get to decide whether we're women or men. And we men, sometimes we don't understand how women think, and women don't understand how we think. And so this is a perfect example of that, if we don't get to decide whether we're going to be born a man or a woman, and we kind of have different ways of thinking about different things, then it's kind of it helps us to understand, oh yeah, it's not free will, it's just like how we were made. That wasn't up to us.
Yeah.
So here's my question. So we discussed the emotional side of it. How do we do the science side of it?
All right, well, the science side, to the extent that we want to really be scientists, in the best sense of the word, science is objective. Science doesn't in other words, a person's personality, a person's, idiosyncrasies or whatever shouldn't enter into scientific exploration or debate. So, for example, sometimes I admonish Mitch for being rhetorical. He'll I'll start defending, the existence of God, and he'll start saying, oh, so you're kind of like the creationists and all, right? The idea is in a scientific debate, it's very important to keep personalities and rhetoric and these kinds of things out of it, because it just distracts us from focusing on the essence of what we're considering.
So things like good and bad and moral and immoral.
Well, exactly.
You're breaking up
right.
again.
Just asking.
No, that's a perfect example, Yuri. So you kind of don't believe in morality. Okay, we may have our personal kind of view of that, but we're going to treat you with respect because that is your view. And for some reason that the universe is making us, kind of have a different perspective, but that's not even up to us anyhow. So, that's a perfect example. We would explore that with civility and mutual respect, without kind of having these personal reactions to to either side.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, one thing that's interesting about Yuri's view about amorality and of morality being just kind of a leftover from religion. Well, I don't agree. And here's something that a certain person who shall remain nameless for purposes of this podcast, but a certain person did not understand why I would give Yuri a platform to speak, because they think that his views are, I guess, harmful or offensive or whatever. But here's the thing: is I just want it to be clear that just as I want to be heard, I want my views to be heard because I believe my views to be right. I also feel like other people should have that chance, and I don't like censorship. And now, and of course, ironically, Yuri will probably disagree with me on this, but I think that there's something actually wrong with censorship in two ways. Here's the problem with censorship, is that censorship it causes us to be fake. It causes us to change our behavior and say things we don't mean, rather than say the truth, because that offends people. Like I don't like censorship. Like, for example, I may not like certain cuss words. I don't like the F word in particular. But I don't like to lecture somebody every time someone uses a swear word I don't like, because otherwise I'm missing the essence of what they're saying. And so it's really important to listen to people. And so I try to not react negatively to people, if that makes sense.
Well, Chandler, that's a very good point, and I agree with you. I think to a great extent, we have to be understanding and considerate and open to views other than our own. And that's, so censorship is bad in scientific debate and all. But, sometimes what we're talking about has nuances. It becomes complicated. For example, let's say some company, wants to kind of wants to come out with a toy that's pornographic, some kind of like a really pornographic toy for 7 and 8 year olds, right? So I think we could all agree that we would censor that kind of behavior, because it just seems wrong. So then I guess what I'm asking is what's the difference? What's the difference between our just allowing people to be on this podcast and all that have different views regardless of what they are, and what's the difference between that and our disallowing for example very extreme violence in the media or extreme sexuality directed to your young kids? How do we explain that difference?
Yeah, George, you actually raise a very important question, because on one hand, I feel that there's something wrong with censorship, and yet at the same time, I also feel that there are some things that should not be allowed. I don't want pornography, young kids viewing pornography. Of course, I don't like any of it anyway, but what's the difference there? It's it's almost like I have a standard for things that people say, like with politics, religion, philosophy, somebody has a certain view that they would say, and I think that should not be censored. But there's other things, like it may be a toy or like a video or something that I think should be censored. So I'm trying to figure out where to draw that line, where that balance is.
Right, and also, for example, I happen to be Jewish, right? Let's say I wasn't Jewish, and I'm gonna just blame the Jews for everything, because some people do that, right? And so I mean, I in a certain sense, or hate speech, just sometimes people say that, well, we should kill these people, we should, do we allow this kind of talk in scientific debate? And if we do, what are the reasons? If we don't, what are the reasons?
Okay, let's take a slightly different point of view. Say women going topless in parks. It's okay for us to go topless in parks, and the reason why women aren't allowed to go topless in parks is
that okay? Yeah, Yuri, that's a good topic.
Question.
Yeah, because that is a debate. I've seen people debate this on Facebook.
Is it what's inherently
because
wrong
of nipples?
with it?
That's why.
And it's like we all have nipples.
I may be mistaken, guys, but I think that here in the United States, women are allowed to go topless. I may be mistaken about that, but I think
no,
that
they're
may be
not.
the case.
Depends on the
public
state.
exposure.
Oh, okay. So it's state.
It's public
it's a state
exposure.
law. Okay.
You can't go in your trust me. Try going in get your wife to go in your local swimming pool topless. See what happens. not only will you get resistance from your wife, you'll get it from everyone else. So the question is, where are we getting this resistance from?
All right, well, that kind of makes sense. In other words, women tend to have more control over their libido than do guys. So a woman can see a guy without a top or whatever, it's no big deal. But if a guy sees a woman without a top, then, like, we apparently can't control ourselves.
Don't get me wrong, well. I'll stare, but I can control my libido. Don't get me wrong, I'll stare, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, this episode has gotten really haywire. But seriously, this is actually a very good question. I'm being serious here. This is a perfect example of where there is a case where a lot of people in America, for example, think that should be censored and they think women should not be allowed to go topless. Now, yeah, what is the rationale for this? And I mean, because I genuinely am curious about this, because it doesn't seem like there's any logic to it. Because there are all kinds of things that are legal. Like, there are women that go topless in these movies. I mean, you know, those movies will be like rated R or something. But it's allowed in a movie for an actress to do it, but it's not allowed out in the general public sphere. And you have to wonder what the reasons are for this.
Yeah, and Chandler, I think it's cultural. In other words, like, there are parts of the world where women walk around topless all the time, and it's every day, it's common, and, like, you know, it's completely safe. But I think this is a recognition that in our culture and in certain European cultures, we men can't control ourselves. You know, it's like, it's a recognition that we're dysfunctional. We don't have that kind of control. And, like, you know, we may, you know, it would be good if we did, but I think it's a recognition by the law that even if it would be good if we did, we don't. So I think it's just it's a pragmatic. Go ahead.
Hold on, George. I've been to Saint-Tropez. I've been to the south of France on the Riviera there, and trust me, men can control themselves. Up. Is it something about Americans? I don't know, but just giving you guys a hard time. Sorry.
I think it is about, for example, with the
I've
gun
been
laws.
to the south of France, and women go topless there, and men control themselves.
No, but it is. It could be American, because, like, with guns, like, the Canadians have so many more guns, you know, than we do, but they don't use them on each other. Whereas, like, here in the United States, we're, like, you know, we're extremely violent. There's something very dysfunctional about American culture.
Some of this is kind of like us being primitive apes or something like that. I don't know. But
yeah, I think there's something about Americans that's weird. I know, I've lived in America my whole life.
Well, if you've ever watched that movie by what's his name, Michael Moore, Bowling for Columbine, he gets into that. He tries to explain why are Americans so, like, much more violent than the rest of the world.
Yeah.
He blames the Puritans.
I think, just for an accuracy, I think Americans are probably more violent than Western countries, but I wouldn't say the rest of the world.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. I don't think Americans want to be comparing themselves to Russia. Or
Yeah, I don't know, maybe by comparison.
So, and then going on, so, you know, you take a look at our TV, and so, you know, Canadians are affected by American TV too. There's, like, sort of, violence is definitely not to any significant degree censored, whereas sexuality is on our TVs. So again, right, from a scientific point of view, just keeping it vaguely on track, why? Sorry?
Go ahead.
So why would we have such an aversion to sexuality as a North American society compared to the violence that we routinely see. You know, you compare the English cop shows to the American cop shows. You know, it's completely different.
Yeah, and you're right, and it's like we don't know what explains it, but we do recognize the difference, and so a lot of times laws have to take that into account. You know, they may not know why things are the way they are, but like, you know, where in certain cultures you don't need certain laws, in other cultures you may.
Yeah, and I'm
And
still
ultimately, it's just
oh yeah, I was
go
just gonna
ahead, Chandler.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, yeah, I'm still trying to find where that line is. Is censorship sometimes good? Like, is there a time when censorship is justified and it's not good to let something be allowed? That, I'm really struggling trying to figure out where that is.
You want to know something, Chandler? If I were king, my God, if I were king, I would be the biggest censor in the world, because like when I don't watch television, you know, because there's so much violence, and so like, you know, when people see violence, you know, when kids see violence, they say, oh, that's just the way the world is, and I have a feeling that makes them more likely to do violence or have violent thoughts or be more aggressive. So the way I see it, let's say there was a law that, for example, that like all the books and movies and video games that have already been made, all right, fine, they're legal, right? But if you're an author or a movie maker or a video game maker, from this day forward, you cannot have any violence in these games. My prediction would be that like that would be a very positive influence in the world. So like what I'm trying to say is like our laws are designed to help to protect us from ourselves and from each other, or, you know, our kind of like more base instincts. And in the past, that had to do with like, you know, physical assault and you know, robbery and lying and stuff. But in this digital world, in this kind of like, you know, internet media-driven world, we're finding that images and words can be just as harmful as these other like traditional ways of hurting each other. So yeah, I'm you know, I'm not the right person to ask them, because I would be like extremely, you know, I would try to convince people, hey, let's do an experiment for the next 5 years or so. Let's not allow anyone to like produce any book or movie or TV show that has any violence, and see what the effect would be.
Yeah, and the thing is, George, I feel like I would actually agree with that motion. I feel like I would actually agree with that, because it's like you're saying, I do think people witnessing this violence does actually cause them to be more violent in their life.
I kind of disagree, because I've been desensitized to violence all my life, and I don't have the need to go out there and just do the same things I see on TV or video games and all that. Grand Theft Auto,
Well,
you know, I can't tell you how many times I kill people in Grand Theft Auto.
No, well,
But I
WC,
ain't
that's because
me.
you're an evolved person. You're an exception. You get, for example, that there's no free will. You know how few people get that? You're an exception. But the problem is that a lot of people, you know, don't have your sense of evolved being.
Yeah, I see what George is saying here, because people like us, we're immune to that effect, because we're not violent people, and so even though we witness violence, it doesn't have that effect on us. But that's different. We're evolved people, like George said. We're adults. We're already formed to be the way we are. But I am concerned about what effects does this have on toddlers and young kids as they witness this growing up. What effect does that have on their developing brains?
And Chandler, it's not like we don't already know this, because back in the 60s and 70s, there was extensive experimentation, and they determined through so many experiments that yes, the violence in the media makes our kids more aggressive. So it's not like we don't know what the effects are.
Yeah.
Here's the question: as kids, which of us didn't take a magnifying glass and focus sunlight onto an ant?
I
I
never
certainly
did
did.
that.
Yeah,
Y'all want me to answer that?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, see, yeah, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Okay, so I will admit this. I did that once. You know, there was a lot of dumb things that I did, you know. And of course,
Same here.
you know,
Where'd you get that idea? That's the question.
I don't
Probably.
Yeah, I also nearly set my hand on
My
fire one
hatred of
time.
insects. That's where it came from.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I've you know, in the past I've killed a lot of insects in my life, you know, and it's kind of weird because now I'm like don't even want to kill the insects, so I've changed a lot. But yeah, when I was a kid, I did all kinds
I
of.
still haven't crossed that hurdle yet.
Yeah, yeah.
If I see a roach in my house, I'm sorry.
Yeah, WSD really doesn't like bugs.
Yeah, especially when they suck my blood. Especially when they sucked my blood maybe 4 years ago.
Absolutely.
They came in right there and they were a pain in the ass to get rid of.
I will tend to be kind to insects, even though I don't believe they feel. I don't think they're sentient. You know, I may be wrong, but if like a mosquito lands on my arm, yeah, that's a dead mosquito.
Yeah, I know, and see that, and what happens is like that's like a reflex. Before you even see the mosquito, as soon as you feel something bite you, you've already whacked it, haven't you?
Yep.
Exactly.
It's like an instinct.
But all right, fine. I hope we're correct that mosquitoes don't feel pain. So like, you know, they go to mosquito heaven or they whatever, you know, but like
actually when you squash them dead like that, they die instantly.
Yeah.
I mean, you get crushed to death in a matter of seconds. That's pretty much instantaneous.
Yeah, I would hope that they're suffering.
The same thing will probably happen to you.
Yeah, that's all I can hope.
Chandler?
Yeah?
If there was a wolf biting me, I might swat it too.
Yeah.
And I know it can feel pain.
Yeah. If there was a what? Yuri, a what?
If there was a wolf, biting your ass, you got a chance to get it off you.
And Yuri, because in other words,
I wouldn't talk
we have a
nicely
right to
to
self-defense. If the freaking human was attacking me, you know, and I was afraid they were going to kill me, I'd try to kill them first. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
Yeah, because the whole self-defense thing, that's a different matter. And Poff and I have talked about that extensively.
So my point is, it's not just whether they can feel pain or not.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Like I said, man, Jason Voorhees ain't going to fuck that.
Yeah, but yeah, if something's causing you extreme pain, then I understand why you would swat it to get it to stop causing you pain.
Right. All right. All right. Let's pull this back to the free will thing. So I think what we're saying is like, you know, wolves and other people may not have free will, but there are certain circumstances that outweigh that, and we still have to, you know, behave in a way that defends our interests, defends our life and all. But I think the point is that usually, ordinarily, things don't get that extreme. Things don't get that serious. So that when people do things that are wrong, if we understand that it's not up to them that are doing, you know, what's wrong, we can be so much more compassionate and understanding toward them. And, you know, the world could be so much more peaceful and civil and kind.
Yeah. Yeah, and see, most violence I feel that is done in this world is not a self-defense situation.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
Oh, and then that Chandler, that you bring up a great point. In other words, like most violence is like it kind of like assumes that the other person has a free will. So a lot of violence is like, well, all right, they did something wrong toward me of their free will, so I'm going to punish them. You know, so much of the violence, so much of the crime in this country and, you know, throughout the world has free will as its foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, and to the extent that people get over that mentality of thinking somebody had a free will, hopefully they will not be causing as much pain to people out of that. Because that's the thing. I mean, like, okay, for example, let's take racism based on skin color. Now, this is a fine example. Like, okay, for example, let's say there's one person who, like, they think that having purple skin is evil somehow. They think it's evil, but they know the person didn't choose their skin color, therefore they don't commit violence against that person because they don't blame them. Meanwhile, let's say you have another person who's a skin color amoralist, like Yuri. Like, he doesn't believe that any skin color is actually good or bad, and prefers to avoid that language. So that's another method of not committing violence. So it has its place too, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. We're not saying that, like, disavowing it, that, like, rejecting free will is the only rationale for being kind and respectful to each other. Absolutely. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I think both are important. I think investigating and debating the issue of morality is one thing that's valuable, but then also understanding that nobody had a free choice in the matter, no one has a free will, that's basically another complementary thing. Like, these two things can work together in a sense.
Yeah, Chandler, let's go back. Yuri, if you're okay with this, let's go back to this, like, exploring amorality, because, like, Chandler and I, most of us kind of, like, just like I'm a theist and you guys are atheists, in this sense, kind of like you're an amoralist and we tend to be moralists. So let's explore this. Let's get more into this. So, like, all right, if you're not, if you're amoral, then what is your criteria for determining what is legal and what isn't, what is, like, desirable and what isn't?
I'll turn it around the other way. Is what you think is moral and immoral is that you see it as either desirable or undesirable.
All right, if I were to answer that question, yeah,
bypass the middleman morality.
Criteria, yeah, Yuri, my sole criteria is, and this goes back to, like, a statement that the British philosopher John Locke made, that goodness is what creates happiness. So if goodness was what creates happiness, then evil or badness is what creates unhappiness. So that's my criteria. In other words, like, if something, and it gets complicated because sometimes, we don't know whether something is going to create more goodness than or more happiness than unhappiness. But I think, as a general rule of thumb, that, I think, it explains the basis of morality. That if we believe or predict that a certain behavior, like killing or lying or stealing, is going to make people unhappy, then we're going to have to we establish a moral principle or precept or law, to counter that kind of behavior.
George, if that's your desire, that's fine by me.
Yeah.
The Buddhists amongst us, they may sort of see through this and saying, wanting happiness or desiring happiness, that is actually the source of unhappiness.
Yeah, so we're unhappy because we want to be happy and we're not. Something like that?
Yeah, at the moment we're not.
Yeah, so, but Yuri,
Yuri, since the death of my child, I have. Sorry, George, you're breaking up.
Hello?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't realize that your child had died. God, that must have been very, very difficult. I'm sorry.
Well, our son died about 10 years ago. And since that time, I've realized chasing happiness is silly.
Huh.
All right, but all right, because Yuri, my main field of research over the last several decades has been happiness, and so like it may be silly, all right, in a certain sense, but it seems like biologically, it's like it's unavoidable. We're hardwired to seek and want what we predict is going to make us happier, and we have this aversion toward what we believe is going to make us less happy.
Yeah, but I think there's a. Oh, no, my wife's mucking around in the kitchen. So I think there's a lot of things that we're hardwired for, and just because we're hardwired for it doesn't mean we should be desirous of it.
All right, but let's explore this. So, like, because like the Buddhists kind of like, I mean, like I just was reading about Buddhism, and actually they haven't a clue about what Buddha said, because like basically the stuff wasn't written down over like until several hundred years, until after he like was no longer around and stuff. But like one of the kind of like popular Buddhist teachings is that there is a kind of a state that is higher than happiness, that is more valuable than happiness, and that involves not, kind of like being happy. I don't get that. To me, that like, it would seem like, something that's higher than happiness would just be more happiness. Yuri, how do you comprehend that?
I'm not a Buddhist, so and I fundamentally disagree with a large amount of it, but then again, I disagree with much, but that's irrelevant. Just don't, here's my advice. There's no should about it. What I found works for me is just don't chase happiness. Because it's okay when it's like buying a new car. And so how long does your happiness with the new car last? 5 minutes?
All right, well, Yuri, all right. I'm actually like, I had recruited this young woman, to co-write a book on happiness with me. And unfortunately, her grandmother died recently, so she's in mourning and she can't write a book while that's, But one of the principles that one of the themes of this book was, and hopefully will be, that, for example, let's say something happens. Let's say I lose a friend, or I lose something that I value, or somebody does something that I feel is wrong, immoral. And so, like, if I become sad or angry or fearful, this idea is like, I don't understand what good it does me. So I say to myself, all right, if I begin to become angry with someone, for example, I'll say to myself, well, wait a minute. If this anger isn't doing me any good, if it's not doing them any good, and if it's actually maybe perhaps not necessary, or not, or actually might actually make things worse, then I'm going to try to talk myself out of this anger to feel happier. So in other words, like, I think that with happiness, we kind of like sometimes we want to avoid it. It's like this biological programming to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So that when the opportunity arises, when we can rationally avoid unhappiness, or anger, sadness, fear, I'm not sure, why wouldn't it be, wise and positive and desirable to avoid those negative feelings?
Okay, George, here's my take. I'm just going back to my son. I'm going back 9-10 years ago. I can remember walking to his grave and thinking about evolution and grief. I'm sort of fairly analytical when it comes to these things. And the conclusion I came to is, I'm not going to fight this grief. Evolution has imbued me with this capacity to feel grief. I'm not going to fight it. And I don't.
Yeah, and Yuri, I get that. Yeah, in other words, like when some certain things happen that are so profound, so kind of like a part of us, so deep a part of us that it seems like even wrong to go against that. Yeah, no, I understand that.
I wouldn't use the word wrong, but this is, evolution. So did it? I'm not going to fight it. And the same, sort of using the example of anger that you had. Somebody crosses you and you feel angry with them. The first thing is, if you're lucky, you realize you are angry. And depending on how analytical you are, you may sort of try and work out the source of that anger. Or you might just, realize you are angry and see the pointlessness of it and move on.
And that's the point, Yuri. In other words, like, let's say I encounter a Trump supporter. I despise Trump. I can't imagine. I can't understand how anybody would have voted for him. But this person voted for him, and he's.
I don't understand it either.
So the idea is like, and this is where this free will perspective, this no free will perspective comes in. We tell ourselves, wait a minute, this guy is like, his perspective is so wrong. It's so, just wrong, or however we want to phrase it. It's so unbeneficial. But since they don't have a free will, it would be wrong for us, or it would be illogical for us to blame him, for us to become angry with them. Then that provides a rationale that
it's really hard to do.
Oh God, yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah, but then again, you can sort of say the same about cancers or certain parasites that burrow into children's eyes and eat their way out.
Actually you're getting to the very root of this. In other words, like, it's not our evil, it's not our horrible stuff. It's the stuff of the universe. And then the question becomes, why would the universe want to be this way? I know.
I don't think it. Again, I think as much as I've talked about desires and things like that, I think I'm talking to an illusion when I talk about our desires, our wants and wills. End of the day, I don't think the universe wants stuff as such, but I don't know what Chandler or WSD think.
Yeah, Chandler, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I would say the universe wants things only because we want things. I mean, we're part of the universe, but I don't think that the universe wants things outside of us as animals, sentient beings wanting things, if that makes sense.
All right, well then, Chandler, let me ask you something. For example, I very strongly want to be very, very happy every moment of every day. And I also want to be very, very good. I don't want to impinge on anybody else's happiness, right? So these are my wants, but it doesn't seem like the universe has these same wants. In other words, the universe isn't allowing me to do this. So how do you explain this?
Damn sure don't.
Yeah, how do you explain that?
So you want to be good and you want to be happy, and that's all fine, but you're saying that the universe is not allowing it.
Yeah.
Well.
Oh yeah, it does kind of do that. Yeah, because about humanity with the monetary system, a lot of other people starve and all that.
Yeah. Well.
That's the opposite. I'm pretty sure it's the opposite of happy, but
Yeah. So I mean, the way I would describe it is that the other parts of the universe are stopping you based on what they're doing, and of course because they have different desires than you. So it's the desires of the different parts of the universe that are opposed to yours.
That's a good. Yeah, I get that. That's a good perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so here's the thing. In other words, if in my mind, okay, there's a part of me, for example, like sometimes I overeat late at night, and sometimes I don't want to, right? Sometimes the stronger motivation is that I don't eat. Sometimes it's that I do eat, right? But I recognize that it's not up to me. So it seems like there's a part of the universe that's going to like allow, some, motivation or force to win out and some other force to lose out and stuff. So it seems like there's a part of the universe that's kind of like, that's deciding this.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, though, is because it's not consistent, and because sometimes one thing wins and sometimes the other thing wins, that the very fact that it's different each time rather than being the same every time implies to me that it's not directed by a third party, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Well, now explain that.
Oh yeah, right. Sure. I'll go into depth. Like, let's suppose that people never overate when they knew that they shouldn't or whatever. And they always, the one desire like that always won out. Then that would imply that the universe was guiding all life forms toward a certain direction.
Okay, yeah, and so again, you guys, I happen to be a theist, but I happen to believe that God is like a Jekyll and Hyde God. Sometimes God is really good, sometimes God is really bad. But all right, from an atheist or a non-theistic perspective, how do you explain that? The universe sometimes wants, what's good and creates pleasure and stuff, and the universe sometimes wants what's evil or bad or just creates displeasure.
Just say universe, because if you say God, I'm going to just say he's an asshole, because I'm going to keep calling that.
Right.
Because I'm thinking all-powerful, all-knowing. I'm like,
No, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, well, and here's the deal, like, the whole... I just wanted to say, the whole Jekyll and Hyde God of a God that's contradictory and confused like that would have to be the only type of God that can exist, based on what we're seeing.
Well, because that's the only logical God that could exist.
Yeah.
And here's my take, George. Universe doesn't want anything. It's just is.
All right, so I get that, right? So in other words, the universe just is, but the universe, according to what Chandler was saying, is that like sometimes it allows us to, for example, behave the way we want to, and other times it doesn't allow us. I mean, how are we to understand that?
I'm not sure Chandler said that, but if he was, he's anthropomorphizing the universe.
Right, and I didn't say that exactly. I mean, because what it comes down to is we're unable to really inspect the real root causes of why some desires win out more than others. Like for whatever reason, like if you end up eating late at night, then we could theorize that you were more hungry for some reason. Something happened in your day that made you more hungry. You know what I mean?
Okay, all right, but all right, let's say okay, all right, I don't have a free will, so my will is not mine. So part of me is like I'm conditioned to want to do good, want to be good. But then sometimes I'm not able to, whether it's overeating or whatever it is. I'm still kind of like, in other words, like I'm kind of like seeing myself as an agent or a being that has certain preferences. But if I'm not allowed to to behave according to these preferences, then I'm trying to understand, well, how do we understand the universe or the entity, whatever we want to call it, that's not allowing that?
I think your language, George, allowing us, it's misleading. I can't help thinking that.
All right, so let's try to think of a different word than allowing. So in other words,
here's the way I would express it: is the universe is unfolding. We are part of it.
All right, so I get that. In other words, like my hand, I've got this hand, right hand, left hand, and they're a part of me, right? But they're not the deciding part of me. In other words, like if I go to write something down, the hand is going to do what the brain wants it to do. So I get we're part of the universe, but it doesn't seem like we're the part of the universe that decides anything.
Yeah, but the brain, is the brain really the deciding part of you? It's a deciding part of you, but it's certainly not the deciding part of you.
And that's the
We
question.
talked about earlier on about all our conditioning, about sort of our TV, culture, all that has conditioned our brains to be the way they are and to make the decisions they make.
Right, Chandler, what's your take on this so far?
Well, yeah, it's like there's no such as thing as the deciding part, but every part is really, it's like a decision by every element of the universe all at once somehow.
All right, so you have this totality of the universe, all the different influences and factors and all that. It just it's like an equation. It's like, sometimes it makes us like do what it makes us want to do, and sometimes it doesn't, it makes us do what we don't want to do, but it's an entire collection.
Yeah, and it's interesting because notice that there's conflict within that. For example, okay, now for people who like sports, I don't really like sports, but the rest of the world does. So this will make
I don't know why, but they do.
Yeah, so this will make a good podcast example. It's like a football game, okay? There's all these different players, and they're of opposing teams. So one team is trying to score goals on one side, and the other's doing just the opposite. And then, they're all trying their hardest, and in the end, it comes to who's smarter, who's stronger, who's faster, all these different factors that play out how well the teams work together. It's a complicated mess of factors, and to understand it, you would have to be like a football expert. But then to ask, like, for example, why the universe allowed this team to score more points than the other would be such a mistaken question, because I don't think there's a mind apart from the players themselves and their fans that would actually prefer a certain outcome. It's really the outcome of all their efforts and which wins in the end.
Yeah, I know. Hell, even though they say it's like a strategy to it, it's mainly but it's physical aspect of it.
Yeah,
and isn't there an element
you have the physical condition to run down that field, or to stop some of those 300-pound men from tackling the person with the ball? Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
All right. So you have the skill, right? You have the abilities, but let's say you have some guy, a quarterback, throws a Hail Mary pass 80 yards, and it seems like it's a matter of luck, right? He either sometimes he tries to throw that pass and he gets it right on the target. Other times he doesn't. So there seems to be an element of luck built into this, what causes things to happen.
The universe is chaotic. Get used to it.
Yeah, it's unpredictable in any case. Yeah, because that's just it. You bring up a good point, George, because when somebody is throwing a ball, whether it's a basketball or whether they're kicking a soccer ball into a goal, whatever they're doing, every single time they're intending to make the target every single time. Yet sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So what's up with that?
Right, exactly. So
some say some would say that they didn't aim it properly or they didn't kick it properly.
Well, that's a good point, right? So in other words, sometimes they try to. So it's not. I think you're right. So it could be that it's not like the universe is allowing them to get it or not. It's just it's based on their skill on how well they do that. But then I can't, again, because we don't have a free will, so it's not up to us how well we do that or not.
I know, it's very weird. And so, we know that through practice, people are able to somewhat become able to do what they want to more often than they were in the past. You know, like my friend Lucas, he's really good at bowling, so he hits most of the pins most of the time. Whereas, like, I'll get a whole bunch of gutter balls, but then there were 2 times last night that I actually hit all 10 pins in one strike. Like, you know, it's like, so how explain that? It's weird.
Or explain to people that actually get a perfect 300.
Yeah, like what's up with that?
Yeah, and then like we have to explain this. Like in other words, like when we explain ourselves, right? We explain ourselves relative to this consciousness that we have. We have like these desires, preferences, and all that stuff. But you know, the scientific view is that we don't ascribe that stuff to the universe. So how do we explain that?
Yeah, so you're kind of like into like where like from where does this desire come? Like why do we have desires sort of in a way?
Right, because they're not ours, right? We have them, but like, you know, it's up to the whim, and I'm not sure that's the right word, you know, but it's up to like the universe.
Yeah.
All right, let's pull back, guys. So like, all right, so this is interesting, but like, you know, again, going back to like this idea that like we get that nobody has a free will, but we still can't act about according to that, you know, 24/7. We kind of like, you know, and so how can we get ourselves to kind of like, it's about being non-judgmental. It's about being accepting and understanding that absolutely nothing is up to us. And because nothing is up to us, we should be much more kind and respectful, you know, toward each other.
Yeah. Yeah, so and I don't really have the answer yet. All I know is I want to work on that. I want to work on just recognizing that and my applying in my life when people are different, realize that, you know, they couldn't have chosen to be any different.
Right, WSD, Yuri, what's your take? What do you think we
I
can
don't know. I
do?
think
Or
between the four of us, we're quite respectful.
Yeah, I think we do pretty good most of the time.
What I was going to say is, you know, I was changing or trying to change a light bulb, and so my wife was asking me about it, and I snapped at her, and it was just basically I wasn't aware in the moment.
right, and I guess like your wife probably recognizes that, like, you know, you just went into like la la land. Well,
No, I don't. No, she didn't recognize. She asked me why I did that.
Oh, okay. But that's the basis of forgiveness. In other words, like we understand, you know, we're not perfect. Other people are not perfect. And that's why, you know, that creates a kind of an understanding based on this realization that sometimes we do what we do, you know, even though we don't want to do it.
Yeah, it's sort of like that Saint Paul or whatever. George, you brought that up before. How Paul in the Bible he can't figure out why he can't do what he wants to do.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, that's a strong refutation of free will right in the Bible. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know all that much what to say. I know that I probably should get off of here and take my shower and get to bed soon, though.
I already took mine.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, hopefully this will turn out to be a good episode when people are listening to it, because we've had some audio trouble and we've had to ask people to repeat what they've said a few times, but
Yeah.
but overall this has been a kind of just a relaxing discussion between friends here, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This has been very enjoyable. Definitely. Yep.
Yeah, my
I can't
cousin
help
isn't
myself.
here this week.
Yeah.
That's why it's been quiet.
Yeah, so was there anything else anybody wanted to say before we officially end this?
I'm
Well,
good.
I just want
good.
just to like we might want to continue on the same theme, because again, like we've devoted 186 episodes, you know, for the most part to why we don't have a free will, but now we might want to spend a bit more time kind of like trying to figure out how to live that truth. how to not just know it, but have it like how to incorporate it more and more into our daily lives. I mean, like, maybe if Trick or some other people want to join us, we may just want to like just revisit this to kind of like get more and more practice doing this.
Yeah, sure. And we've done that before with other things where we had to do part 1, 2, 3, 4, anything. So yeah, so George, maybe you can help suggest like title and description sort of a thing for this kind of thing, because it's all over the place. Trying to bring it into one, summarizing it is difficult.
Yeah, and that's all right. And when we tangent into this stuff about like what is morality and stuff, that's great stuff too. So it's good we allow ourselves to do that.
Yeah, see, I like that, because even though, we tend to not stick to any one topic too long, we get into some very interesting stuff, and this morality thing is super interesting, and so it's worth discussing, and I'm just interested what, if any, merits there are to Juris' amoral view, because I don't know. Yeah, so...
Yeah. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, merits?
Yeah.
So, you haven't been listening to me, Chandler.
Well, Yuri, no, actually, no. It is a very good, very important topic. I mean, maybe next week we can focus on that. What is the essence of morality? Something like that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I think you should wrap this up and save it for another time.
Yeah, we'll save that for another time, Yuri, because if I'm still misunderstanding what you're saying, then we'll just have to cover that another time. So. Anyway, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast, and we've been talking more about applying the knowledge that nobody has a free will in our everyday lives, and therefore not reacting emotionally to them in the same way that we might have when we were a free will believer. And so I think that there is definitely a benefit if we're able to do this, because it will let us have discussions of great importance, and we may even change people's minds in regards to religion, politics, philosophy sometimes, but we're only going to be productive if we can get rid of these negative emotional reactions. So I think that's something we all need to work on. We do pretty good, but everybody can do better. Isn't that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well said, Chandler.
Okay, so I hope you learned something from this, all our listeners, and thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Yeah!